Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be talking about this past weekend's matches, the first matches that count as the May qualifiers for the May tournament that will be happening later this month, or more simply, week 13 of the Overwatch League. It's an interesting week. Let's jump into it, take a look at my picks that I had and how I did, and talk about everything. So as you can see here, big picks, 2-0 once again, recovering from that awful streak that I had of ones where I didn't do very well, to now having matches that that's 3 weeks in a row where I think I'm 6-0. That's pretty good for me. Sorry, 2-0. 3 weeks in a row, I'm 2-0. Maybe more than that, I don't know. Not important. Let's talk about the matches though. My weekly record 7-3. So I'm doing all right. But let's talk about the matches, and I'm going to lump the first two matches I want to talk about today, the Seoul Dynasty's two matches, their match against the Guangzhou Charge and their match against the Hangzhou Spark. The Seoul Dynasty have lost 9 straight maps after winning their first 9 maps. I don't know what to say about the Seoul Dynasty. They haven't looked very good. They've been struggling a lot. I thought they would easily beat the Hangzhou Spark. Even after they lost to the Guangzhou Charge, I thought they would still easily beat the Hangzhou Spark. I had resigned myself to the fact that the Charge are a better team than the Spark. I have been very hesitant to say that just because I am very high on the Hangzhou Spark. Still, I very much like the team. I think that they're a very good team with a lot of talent on the roster that we just haven't seen much of in a way. So I look at the Hangzhou Spark roster, and anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Seoul Dynasty, they lose. Against the Guangzhou Charge, they play Marvel Gesture again. It doesn't work. They bring Michelle in for the match against the Spark. It still doesn't work. Really, the Dynasty aren't looking that great, and I think that we're seeing really where the Dynasty are as a whole. We're kind of seeing where they fall in the overall structure, in the overall grand scheme of the league. They're probably a middle-of-the-pack team, maybe high middle of the pack, but middle of the pack nonetheless. We'll have to see more from them, but they have slipped in the standings as a result of this weekend, but we'll get there when we get there. I wasn't impressed. Profit's play on the Echo was not that good. Fitz looked, okay on the Sombra, but I think not having the McCree available really did not do a lot of good for this team. They have some work they need to do to improve. I think they could benefit from adding a player in the flex tank role. But this is a team that I think is really odd, and I want to see more good performances out of them again, because they're going to have a tough run. They may go into the May tournament with a 1-3 record, if not worse, and that doesn't put them in a very good spot based on the performances we've seen out of them so far. Moving on to the second match on Saturday, we had the NYXL taking on the Shanghai Dragons. Shanghai Dragons with the reverse sweep against the NYXL. It was a very interesting series. New York definitely looked very good to start, but they started to just kind of struggle and make mistakes. The Dragons punished those mistakes, and the Dragons just started to play much better. New York took them by surprise, clearly, with a lot of their early comps. Dragons adapted and performed well. The Dragons are looking very, very good. They are looking like the dominant force that everyone has thought they are, and I think this win cemented them as the best team in the Overwatch League. Obviously, it's difficult to tell when you have teams in Asia and the teams in North America, and you may look and say, yeah, well, Fusion were able to 3-1 New York. Dragons, they reverse sweep them, but I also think New York is playing significantly better now than they were when they played Philadelphia, and Shanghai was able to pretty dominantly win the last 3 maps. So it was a good match. Obviously, if you didn't watch it, you know the result. But I'd still say it's worth watching. It was a good series and one I think you should check out. The next match was the Dallas Fuel against the Washington Justice. Much closer than the first time these two teams played, but still very one-sided in favor of the Dallas Fuel. Washington Justice not looking very good. You got to put them towards the bottom overall, in just in terms of teams and performances. They have not looked good, and it's going to be a struggle to look at the Justice and think they are going to be a serious contender at any point throughout the remainder of the season. They need some pieces to help their roster out. In the current situation we're in, that's difficult, though we have seen a couple teams make some moves to bolster their team, so I won't say that it's impossible, but it is certainly something that is difficult when everything is closed, and it's not easy to say, hey, I have all these players, and I need to bring in more players to help me, and how can you really do that when you're struggling to really get a grip, a strong grip on the meta? It can be difficult, but I think that this is a team that needs to make changes, and as soon as things start to open up, they need to be a team that really looks to add some more players, because I'm not crazy about what they've been doing. Moving on to the next match, we have the LA Valiant with the upset win over the Atlanta Reign, a reverse sweep for the Valiant. McGravy just catching dubs all week. First with Halsey, now with the actual match against the Atlanta Reign. Very good win for the Valiant. I think this cements this idea that the Pacific is much stronger than the Atlantic. The Reign have been a team, though, that honestly, they've not really impressed me this season. It looks to me right now like there's, Fusion and Excelsior are above and beyond better than every other team in the Atlantic, with maybe the exception of the Paris Eternal. The Mayhem might be striking up. Spitfire might be striking up. We haven't seen enough from either of those teams against really strong competition to say for sure. And we haven't seen the Spitfire in weeks. But the Valiant's win was very good. KSP and Shax both played incredibly well. Apply had some good play on the Echo, but they definitely performed better when they were running KSP Shax. KSP is just an incredible player. He's arguably Rookie of the Year. He's certainly up there. I would also argue, though, potential hot take here, that he's an MVP candidate, which I know is a very weird thing to say, but to me, when you look at MVP, the idea of an MVP is a player who is so instrumental to a team's success that if you take that team out, they don't have that high level of success. KSP didn't play the first two maps. They lose. He comes in, they dominate the last three maps. KSP has been amazing on the hit scan heroes. He was instrumental in their win against the San Francisco Shock. I think that as the season progresses, if the Valiant trajectory continues to go upwards, they're in a bit of a rock right now. They're 3-6, but I think this is a team that will improve and will continue to get better. I think KSP is the backbone of that, and I think he is an MVP candidate. When it comes to the Atlanta Reign, they had an interesting group they were running. They were running Sharp and Erster, I believe, maybe Sharp Edison. I don't remember exactly. Sharp was one playing the Echo. He looked fine. He definitely looked better than Apply did. The Reign are just a team right now that I think they're just struggling with kind of... They change a lot. They're always switching who their main tank is, who their flex tank is. They'll run Gator and Hawk, or maybe they'll run Pokepo and Gator, or they'll run Pokepo and Hawk, or they'll run Pokepo and FRD, or they'll run Gator and FRD. And they have so many players that they feel the need, I think, to just keep kind of rotating through them when they don't need to. But it was a good series from the Valiant. The Reign, I think they still have a ton of talent, and I think they still have a ton of potential. They're a 4-4 team, right? They have a 500 differential, and they have a +5 differential. If you want to understand how good that is, they have the 5th highest differential in the league. Now, there's a big gap between the 4th highest, which is +10, and the 5th highest, which is +5. But they have the 5th highest differential in the league, and they are 5th in the Atlantic. So I think the Reign are still fine. They slipped up against the Valiant. They obviously had, some tough losses to Paris and Philly, but overall, I think the Atlanta Reign are still fine. I think this was not a good match for them, and it showed. Final match for Saturday was the Houston Outlaws against the San Francisco Shock. A W for the Shock. Even without Sinatra, they're going to be just fine. I know a lot of people may think the Shock aren't going to be fine without him. There's no reason to think otherwise. He hasn't even been playing that much this season. Most teams would certainly struggle losing a player like that, but the Shock have so much depth in the DPS spot. It didn't really affect them that much, especially when the fact, like I've talked about in the past, I don't even think Sinatra was the best DPS player on the team as a whole. I think as a whole, Striker is better. I think Striker is incredible, and I don't think you can sleep on Striker. So I look at this, and I look at the win for the Shock, and it doesn't really surprise me. The Outlaws played about as well as you could expect. It wasn't a close series necessarily. They've been on a bit of a rough patch, but they've had some tough opponents, the Dallas Fuel, the San Francisco Shock. They're going to lose some of these tougher matches. They need to get some wins against some teams like the Defiant, like the Justice, like the Uprising. There's definitely starting to build a major gap between some of these teams. The Outlaws are a team that I think has the ability to beat your teams like the Spitfire, the Mayhem, the Reign, the Eternal. But they need to get some wins consistently against some of these top teams if they want to try to claw their way out of the bottom half of the standings, and the bottom half specifically of the Atlantic Conference. And they'll match up against some of the Pacific Conference teams pretty well, I think, as we go forward. But it is a tough group in the Pacific, and I think that's really where they're going to have to try to hope that they can get some of those wins going forward. Moving on to Sunday, I already talked a bit about the Spark and the Dynasty, but just to kind of run through that real quick, I actually liked what the Spark ran. A lot of Gushue and Winston, which I really like. I love Gushue and Winston. Primal Blades is beautiful. But ultimately, I think that the Spark managed to just exploit the Dynasty's weaknesses in the way they want to play. The Dynasty are a team that adapt very well, and when a team fight kind of devolves, the Dynasty start to rely on profit and gesture, and these players just, they're pure talent. Whereas I think the Spark are a very good team. They play very well as a team. They're coordinated, and I think that they just ultimately rolled over the Dynasty. I think the Dynasty have a lot of problems with what we've seen from them recently. I think they should start to get resolved, but at this point in time, it's difficult to say for sure. Moving on to the second match on Sunday, it was the Chengdu Hunters against the NYXL. 3-1 win for the NYXL, a 3-1 win in 5 maps with a draw on Paris. Sabiolbi's incredible teleport really helped this team out on Paris. I don't look too much into this game, and I say this a lot when it comes to matches against Chengdu. You can never really pull anything out from a series with Chengdu, because you never really know what Chengdu is going to do, nor do you ever really know how good they are. Chengdu is a team that, like, if you told me the Chengdu Hunters beat the Shanghai Dragons 3-0, or they beat the Philadelphia Fusion 3-0, or they beat the Shock 3-0, or they beat the Excelsior 3-0, I'd be like, yeah, okay. Yeah, the Chengdu Hunters just kind of do that. And then if you also looked at me and said the Boston Uprising beat the Hunters 3-0, I'd be like, well, it's a little surprising, but it is the Hunters. That is the kind of thing they do. I think the Hunters are a team that have a very, very, very high, but they just rarely hit that high. They also have a very low, and they rarely hit that really low, but they're a little bit closer to that low on average than they are to their high. The Excelsior struggled a bit, but for the most part, they were fine. Especially when you look at their Route 66 performance. You look at the performance. Was it Li Zhang as the second control map? And I can't even remember what the hybrid map was. I don't believe it was Eichenwalde, but it may have been. I think it was Numbani. It was Numbani. New York was very good on a lot of on these maps, other than the first control map, which the Chengdu Hunters won. I don't really see anything to really take away from here. I think New York is still a very solid team. A 3-1 in 5 maps against Chengdu doesn't change that for me. It's very difficult to tell for sure, especially in a meta like this one where things are so different with Echo. You never really know what you're going to see. So Chengdu Hunters get their first chance at Echo. It's a little weird. It's a little odd. What else are you going to expect? Moving on, the Philadelphia Fusion took on the Paris Eternal. This was an incredible series. I want to shout out Fielder, the new Paris Eternal flex support, who not only is a new flex support, he is a Korean flex support who was playing for this team from South Korea with 200 ping, and he was still incredible. He was hitting sleeps in major moments. He was having huge ults. Incredible. When Fielder's able to be with this team, I think he'll have a huge impact on this team going forward. But obviously the Fusion won this series. It was a 3-2 win for them. Almost a reverse sweep by the Eternal, but the Fusion managed to hold them off. These are two teams that I think are just very evenly matched. I think that their styles clash. I think the Eternal style is pretty good against the Fusion, the way they play. It's just something that we see from these two teams in particular. Fusion managed to pull out the win. EQO, maybe the best looking Echo that we have so far. Rascal is also up there for a candidate for very, very good Echoes, or even best Echoes in the league. Fusion are looking very good. I think they're in a good spot going into this tournament in North America. I think we all expect it to be a Fusion Shock matchup there for the finals, but we'll have to see what happens going forward. But this match was a very good one. Definitely check it out if you didn't. If only to see Fielder and to see Soon fall off Volskaya Industries, because that was a great thing to hear from Brendan Sideshow. Moving on, we have the Florida Mayhem against the Boston Uprising. Not as much of a steamroll for the Mayhem this week against the Uprising as it was last week. Not an awful series from the Uprising. They didn't win a map, but they looked much better than last week. And it's pretty good to look at their progress. I think they still have a lot of work. They still are not a team who I would predict to really beat anybody at the moment, but they're certainly improving, and I think that's important. The Mayhem, I just want to see more from the Mayhem against some of these top teams. I think you have to understand with the Mayhem, they're getting wins, but they're not really beating a lot of these really good teams. They had that win against the Eternal, which was very good, but how are they going to match up again if they play a Fusion or a Shock or a Gladiators or, you know, long-term an Excelsior or a Dragons? It'll be interesting. I'm curious to see what this team is really made of, but another good win for them. They're on a very big map win streak, a very big match win streak, and I think this is a team that is definitely proud of where they are right now. Final match of the weekend was the Toronto Defiant against the LA Gladiators. This is a pretty good match. It was a 3-1 for the Gladiators, but it was pretty close. Surefour played very, very well against his former team. It was a very enjoyable series. I think Surefour was dominating Bird Ring, but Agilities wasn't the best Echo. He was getting a bit beaten down and wasn't having the best results, so it was a little difficult to get a real read on Agilities, other than the fact that I thought he struggled. But I thought the Defiant looked decent. The Defiant are a weird team. You want to put them in a level kind of similar to, I think, the Houston Outlaws or I don't know, but I feel like the Defiant are better than the Outlaws, but when they played them, they lost. So I don't really know. I don't know where this team is. I genuinely have no idea. I couldn't tell you. They are a bizarre team to me, and we will have to continue seeing more from them before we really know where they are. But it was a pretty good win for the Gladiators. I'm still not super sold on the Gladiators as a team. I think they are still somewhat underwhelming as a team. I don't think they come out and impress. I don't think they come out and really do anything super unique or super, special or incredible. They're a team that I think, if they're in the top half going into the tournament, maybe they get a win. They're not going to be a top 4 team, I don't think, by the end of it all. I think they're a team that if they are, they're getting out in the semifinals. I don't think they're a team that has any real chance to push deep into the tournament. And if they do, it's the kind of thing where you expect them to just lose when it gets to the end of it all. I just don't think they're that good, and I think that we are looking at a team who's average, but they need some more better performances before I'm ready to put them any higher than where they are now. So that's it for the matches for this past week. Normally, of course, I would do standings. With the tournament structure, I'm going to wait a little bit just because teams haven't played a ton of matches, so it doesn't really mean anything, and I don't want to focus on the league standings as a whole right now because we're focusing on May for right now. But just know that the teams that are doing really, really well are the Spark and the Charge, the Fuel, the Shock, the Mayhem. They're all teams that have some nice big wins under their belt, so they're feeling pretty good about everything. So that's everything for you guys today. If you guys enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. Leave your thoughts on anything that I talked about in the comment section down below. But I'm going to get out of here. So thank you once again. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Hope you're all staying safe. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.